Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Chant Day. Take a look at these paintings before I begin. Greetings and welcome to Chant Day. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started right away because we have storms that are brewing, so the electricity may not be stable. So we're going to get started with our psalm today. When I got up, I gave thanks that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart is acceptable in the sight of what is right, what is good, what is kind, what is loving. So I am thankful that I looked and saw what the psalm is. And the psalm today is 105. And it's about talking about the wondrous works of the Most High, talking about that. And in that communication with others, that's what we talk about, the wondrous works of the Most High, and how that testimonies of the Most High in our lives that we share with others. So I love it that the Psalm today, 105, talks about that. And it's, a lot of verses here. We have about 45, and 45 is a great number. It's the year my dad came to the earth, in 1945, that is. And now that he has left the earth, um, it's popping up. I feel him. I see. He's there. He's not gone. So I give thanks for this psalm today, 105, and with 45 verses. So I have some hot tea, lemongrass that's on. I'm going to go and retrieve that in a moment here. Ah, okay. So this psalm starts off, Psalm 105. It's titled "To Tell of All Wondrous Works of Righteousness." So, tell of righteousness is wondrous works. So we're talking about righteousness, we're talking about grace, we're talking about mercy, we're talking about love, we're talking about kindness, we're talking about humility, we're talking about honesty and integrity and long suffering and forgiveness. We're talking about all of these attributes that represent what people are serving out here that they call God, Lord, Jesus, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the Buddha, Allah, Jah. This is what is the meaning of all that. So we get into all these different labels and names, and this name is above that name, and that name is above this name, and all of this, and fail to realize it's about kindness, love, mercy, grace, long suffering, forgiveness, kindness, and gratitude, and being thankful. So, this is what this channel in this chant a psalm, this is one of the things that the channel does, is chant a psalm a day. We also, on the 4th of the month, I do a story time, and I went live on Facebook on the 4th, oh, actually the 5th of August, and did a story time by Dr. Seuss called The Sleep Book. Anyway, and I also, on the 27th of the month, so the 4th of the month and the 27th of the month, I go live. And the 27th is about communication, and it's titled Carla's Communication Corner. And it spurred out of my need to have my partner at the time communicate, and there wasn't communication. They always felt that they couldn't communicate with me. I was hard to talk to. I don't know, because maybe I am, and I have to be more of an active listener to listen, because when they would speak, they would talk down about themselves. And I would always say, wait, 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 no, you're amazing, you're great, da, da, da. And that may have been overwhelming. So I want people to come up and be lifted up from where they are, and to, change positively. And sometimes people are not willing to do that. They're just not willing to, move from one thinking of one narrative to a new one. So in this new thinking and in this Chant a Psalm a day, I am looking at liberating the words, okay? Liberating the words. And I don't use pronouns. I use the word that it is. So we get to the meaning. And this is what Chant a Psalm is about. It's about translating the psalm into words of liberation, no pronouns. And it's not changing the meaning, changing anything up. I am basically liberating and taking the chains off of the words. So let's begin. Psalm 105, because the internet is sporadic. Oh, give thanks to righteousness. Call upon righteousness's names. And I called those names just a minute ago. All of the names of righteousness: kindness, love, mercy, compassion, grace, all of those attributes are the names of righteousness. And make known righteous works among folks. So you talk about righteous works, you talk about what goodness is happening. And in verse 2, it goes a step further in chant, make music to righteousness, make a melody to righteousness, tell of all righteous, wondrous works. So you're putting this in a song, okay? People rap about their life, they spit beats, they whatever, they make music, make melody, and they talk about their life in their songs. They talk about their breakups, they talk about their makeups, they talk about their, never evers. they talk about these things in their songs. So the psalm today is talking about, let's do that with righteousness and righteous works. Whatever righteous works has happened in your life, let's put that in a song. So in verse 3, it keeps on with chanting music to glorying in this sacred names of righteousness. Let the hearts of ones who seek righteousness be joyful. People, if you're seeking good and that's what you want to seek, then be joyful. Be joyful at the job you have. Be joyful at the lessons that you're learning. Be joyful at the hurt, at the pain. Be joyful. Yes, it's hard when you're in pain to think about that. I cried on this channel many a times with the pain I felt and was feeling. However, in this psalm, it gives us a new narrative of, look, we have to be joyful again in righteousness because we seek that. And when you seek righteousness, you're going to get attacked. Things are not going to, you're going to get attacked. People are going to hurt you. That's what's going to happen. To strengthen you in that journey of righteousness. So you are seeking righteousness, rejoicing in that. So verse 4 speaks of seeking righteousness, and righteousness is strength. Yesterday's psalm I talked about righteousness is your strength. Seek righteous presence all the time. So you got to seek for the presence of righteousness all the time. And remembering, in that seeking, you're remembering the wondrous works that righteousness has done. So you're going to remember, you're going to think about that. You're going to ponder in your mind on your bed about that. The wondrous works that righteousness has done, and the miracles and the judgments uttered. So in verse 6 now, it's talking to all the offspring, all the servants of righteousness, offsprings of Abraham, children of Jacob, the chosen, all of them is talking to with an exclamation mark. This is verse 6, Psalm 105. Psalm 105, verse 7, righteousness is your God. Righteousness is your Lord. Righteousness judgments are all in the earth. And we see it. We see it as the earthquake in California. I think it was in Los Angeles that happened. And there's a storm, tropical storm coming up, Puerto Rico. It's on that western side going up. And it's gonna, do like a dovetail up to the US and Bermuda area there. So I just want everyone in the path to be safe. I don't wish harm on anyone, not even my worst enemy. So the winds are blowing, and this is Ernesto, not even Ernesto, but this is our ancestors from Africa that's coming off of the coast of Ghana through the formation of these tropical storms. So as we look at verse 7 about righteousness is Lord and these judgments are all in the earth, verse 8 tells us about righteousness remembers these commandments or these vows that were spoken of. And these vows that were spoken of, these words that was commanded in the commandments for thousands of generations. And it keeps on into verse 9 about the covenant, the agreement, right? that was made with Abraham, and righteousness, promised to Isaac. Um, and these are individuals, okay? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. These are individuals that are mentioned as examples of how that communication of that covenant or that commandment was expressed. It was expressed in these individuals. I talked about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego yesterday. That expression of that commitment to righteousness, to goodness, and serving that. So that is that these are confirmed, servants, and it's to I and I. It talks about to Israel as an everlasting covenant. Now, when you see that in there, that is nation building. It is separatist and it's divisive because it's not just Israel, it is I and I. And to I and I, this covenant, the promise, the confirmation as a statute is for all time to come. It's not going to go away because you stop, serving the righteousness of, this agreement and commandment and vow. So in verse 11 is speaking to righteousness, I will give the land of Canaan as portion for an inheritance. Now he's talking about the land of such place. This is land, period. Okay, we see black farmers and Native American lands, farming lands have been, taken. We see fighting and about that happening even on this little small island. And land is ultimately power because you can sustain yourself off of the land. And the Native Americans knew that. And they never colonialized anything. Each tribe had their own, way. And it was the influx of colonialism that caused all of the infighting and the wars and divisions and control of people's lives in serving this other God that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused. They refused. They don't want, the trappings of this world. We have electric companies that are stealing from people. They're not giving them the electricity, yet they're expecting to be paid. So we have a dependency on systems in our world that are not benefiting the people at all. But yet the people are dependent on these systems. So when we talk about inheritance, we talk about portion, we talk about land. In verse 11, it speaks volumes. Verse 12 now goes into a time when such ones were few in number, of little account. Now we're remembering Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego again, and sojourners within, wandering. Okay, these are sojourners. They were few in number. They were of little account. They didn't have any big, fanfare. They weren't no big celebrity. They were just of little account, and they were sojourners, wandering from nation to nation, from one, place to another, from one people to another people. And in verse 14, righteousness allowed no one to oppress these folks. Even though they were few in number, they were of little account, they were sojourners, they were wandering from, place to place and from people to people. They weren't oppressed. They weren't oppressed. They did not have to answer to an electric bill, an internet bill, a phone bill. They didn't have to answer to that. So, and they weren't oppressed. And rulers were rebuked on their behalf. Okay? Speaking, touch not the anointed ones. Do the prophets no harm. Okay, exclamation mark. So righteousness is speaking this in human form. Okay, verse 15 is very powerful. Okay, we don't want to let verse 15 take us into an arrogant place. We want to stay in a humble, in a righteous space. So verse 16, when righteousness summoned a famine on the land, okay, even though that was not a good thing, famine is not ever good. Righteousness is in charge of all of it. All things are working together for the good, for I and I good. So when righteousness summoned this famine on the land and broke all supply of bread, there wasn't any food. Verse 17, righteousness had sent someone ahead of these folks. Joseph that was sold as a slave. Remember a previous psalm I talked about Joseph's siblings were jealous of him to the point where they sold him off into slavery. They, this is what happened to, this is the story, okay? And Joseph's feet were hurt with fetters. Joseph's neck was put in a collar of iron. So we're looking at the glimpse of enslavement. A glimpse of enslavement here when we talk about fetters and collars of iron. Okay. Verse 19 now, until what is said came to pass. The word of righteousness tested. So was Joseph to be a hater because this happened? Was Joseph to hate his siblings for doing that? No. The king now sent, now this is verse 20, the king now sent and released Joseph. This is now the ruler of the people now setting Joseph free. Because remember, in verse 14, righteousness is going to rebuke these rulers on I and I behalf. Okay? So this is what has happened now. The king now released Joseph and made Joseph in charge, ruler of all possessions. Joseph got the key to the kingdom, in other words. Joseph became ruler of all the possessions. He was holding the money bag. And he was holding it to the point to bind princes at and to teach elders. So Joseph became a binder upper of, and a teacher to elders now, to those who are older than him. He's teaching. So in verse 23, we see now Israel came now to Egypt. Okay, Jacob sojourned in the land of Ham. And righteousness made righteous people very fruitful, and also made righteous people stronger than righteous people's enemies. This is verse 24. Verse 25, righteousness turned one's hearts to hate righteous people. So when people hate you, is, you got to look at it as the source where it's coming from. It's not them. Don't, you just forgive them, for they don't know. And that is important, because it's righteousness that's allowing people to hurt you so you can move away from them. Or, righteousness wants that separation, and that isolation from wrongness. And sometimes people have gum on their shoe, as an expression, and that gum comes in. That gum is representing wrongness. It's a tiny gum on their and they bring it into your space. So you don't want that. And when people hurt you, or they show you who they are adversely, you have to believe that. You have to know that, and you have to use that as knowledge about yourself. What am I going to value myself, or let this individual devalue me? So in verse 25, righteousness turned hearts to hate, and to deal craftily with righteous servants of righteousness. In verse 26 now, it said that righteousness sent Moses. Okay. There's an advocate for this. This is a righteous servant, an Aaron, because righteousness had chosen them. Because in verse 27, signs were performed and miracles were made in the land of Ham. And in verse 28, there was a void of light. There was no light in the land. And even though there was no light, there was no rebelling against the words of righteousness. And verse 29, these waters, righteousness, turned into blood, and fish died. Okay, this is the plagues here. In verse 30 now, we see frogs swarming the land. The chambers, all up in the place these frogs are. And verse 31, there were flies and gnats all over. So we have the plagues going on in verse 26 all the way down to 32. We see hail and rain, fiery lightning, striking down the vines, the fig trees. This is storms happening, right? And speaking, the locusts now, young ones, there was without number. So this is the plagues that's being expressed in this psalm, from 26 all the way to 36. 10 verses remembering this drastic situation upon the land. Even the firstborn in the land were struck down, and the first fruits lost all strength. So in verse 37, we see that righteousness brought out Israel, I, with silver and gold, and there was none among who stumbled. So people were brought out safely. All the plague that was going on, you know, the the chosen ones were safe. They were safe, and there was none among them who stumbled. In verse 38, Egypt was glad when these folks left because they thought that they were the cause of their plagues. They were like, thank goodness they're gone. Now we ain't gonna have no plagues. They were glad that they had left. So in verse 39, what did righteousness do? Spread a cloud for a covering and fire to give light through the night. So remember, they didn't have any light, but they still kept the word. In verse 28, remember, there was no light. The land was dark, was without light, void of light. However, even though that was the case, rebelling against his words was not the case. Was not the case. So we see that bread from heaven, quail, and all this was in abundance. In abundance. Okay, go in there. And opened the rock, and water gushed out, flowing through the desert as a river. For it was remembering a promise, a sacred promise that Abraham, who was serving, gave. This was shown through this individual. So in verse 43, the final three verses, righteousness brought the people out with joy. Righteousness brought the people out with joy. And joy is what the word was yesterday, joy. And the chosen ones with melody and music. Okay? And giving the lands of the nations to these ones, and these ones took possessions of the fruit of the people's toil, that the fruit of the people's toil might keep these commandments and observe the laws of righteousness. Make music to righteousness. Selah and Selah again. So this is the end of the psalm today, Psalm 105. Psalm 105. And the word today, let's go look at that word today, is divine. So we see in Psalm 105 a divine words telling of all the wondrous works, because even though we see plagues that were done, this is all working together for the good. So it may be a bad situation, but you have to look at it as the bad situation is working together for good, for because righteousness ultimately is in charge and has that final, word. So in the word today, divine, I am divine. I am divine. When I am aware of the vast expanse of the world, I find righteousness in all things. The birds of the air, the stars of the sky, the creatures of the sea, and of course, fellow human beings. Discovering the divine throughout creation, my life rejoices. There is a, I don't want to use this word, let's see, what's another word? Again and again, repeatedly, discovering in this repeated thrum of the rhythm of life that ties each heart, each life to one another. I feel this pulse of life and have new appreciation for what life means to be a divine being. Okay? Jesus taught and demonstrated a divinity, following in footsteps, Jesus' footsteps. I awaken to I divinity through actions of love, forgiveness, and compassion. By being true to I divinity, I free to express what's inside. I free to be who I am as an individuation of the divine. So what does that mean? Because righteousness taught, right? Jesus was the word, Jesus was the righteousness. That's what we're taught, right? We use that name to represent that one son. However, we know that that is righteousness that teaches and shows action in that divinity. So Ephesians 2:10 talks about, for we are what righteousness has made I to be, created in righteousness for good works. That righteousness prepared beforehand to be I way of life. So we have that in Ephesians chapter 2 verse 10 tells us that we were made for that. We were created for that purpose, to be good, to do righteousness, to be kind. And when we are the opposite of that, we're being used by another entity to perpetuate a different narrative of selfish, unkind, hurtful, jealousy, envy, all of these things that are negative, that does not produce a positive outcome in our physical beings nor in our divine beings. So we have to really look at what we were made to be. We were created in righteousness for goodness, for good works, to be graceful, merciful, compassionate, long-suffering, and forgiving. That righteousness prepared beforehand to be a way of life. So Ephesians 2:10 supports the word today, divine. Divine. And I love that. Divine. Awesome. So let's look briefly now at our verse today before we end. Our verse today is coming from Ephesians again. Oh my gosh. So we have Ephesians 2:10 in our daily word, divine, as well as in our verse today. For I are the handiwork of righteousness, created in righteousness to do good works, that righteousness prepared in advance for I to do. So what does that mean? That means that things are prepared. They're ready. Come, let's go. They're ready. They're prepared in advance. So why worry about this or that or the other? they're all prepared in advance for you and for I and I to do. Beautiful as we end the psalm to chant a psalm today with Ephesians 2:10 as the verse and divine as the word, supported by Ephesians 2:10, and the Psalm 105 talking about telling about the wondrous works of the Most High. Sit and talk about what good people are sharing, what good is happening to you today. So go ahead and post that. What good is happening to you? What good have you seen happening to other people? That's important too, so you're not jealous of other people when they some good is happening to them. You're happy for them too. So shout out to all those that are traveling, that are sojourning today, as we saw in the psalm today, the sojourners, that they are safe out there. Shout out to my nephew that he's safe as he travels to his journey, to his destination today. That everyone in the path of a storm is standing strong and knowing that they can weather this with the wise mind, knowledge, and awareness of righteousness and kindness, mercy, and love that is forever present, always in your lives. So I send that out to all those out there who are in the path of the storm, that you are safe in this time from any catastrophe that may be happening. Because as you know, there was an earthquake in Los Angeles yesterday. So we see earthquakes, hurricanes, these things are happening in a different way than it used to a long time ago. Okay? So thanks for joining as we have a blessed day, everyone.